So, um, so yeah, I'm super happy to have this conversation with you, Mark. um, and we never met actually in person, I believe.
I know, it's crazy. That's a crazy thing.
Um,
You just directed a play, a full play, and I haven't. I never met the actors. I never met the actors.
well, you never touched the actors.
Yeah, I feel very close to them, but I've never met them in person. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah.
No, no, yeah, and I think, you know, I think we have, you know, virtually met much before COVID, and I also feel like I know you through the many people that have met you, and I have met. So I feel like we have met, but we haven't met, and obviously, when you meet someone on Facebook or on Zoom, there is always this thing that what will happen when you meet in real life. There will be a I don't know if you had this experience, but there is a weirdness to it, right?
Yeah, I don't know that I've done that. I don't know that I've done that.
You're doing the distant mentoring, so wasn't that there were people that were being in the program and then you met them only after a long time in person?
Um, this fourth year is the first year that I have people in the mentorship that I hadn't worked with in person. In fact, that was part of the prerequisite up until this year, is that they work with me, that we work together, because for me, mentorship is a relationship, right? More, it's not a class. It is a relationship. And so we needed to make sure that it was the right relationship. And so we all had met in person, but this year I'm working with a number of people that I have not yet met in person. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So I guess it's just this time we're living in. It takes us to. Um, but yeah. So I want to start so we're doing this podcast interview, and I've interviewed already David Diamond, um, and Ron Bonzo, which is a friend, um, working with theater and storytelling. And I'm interviewing you, and we haven't ever met, but we have a lot of people in common. So you started the Mandala Theater for Change, and have been, you know, a practitioner of theater of the oppressed. And I don't know, we're using this term social arts to kind of be inclusive and kind of opening the door to basically any practice that is in the field between the the arts and the social change, and kind of trying to bring that, and get different voices and different experiences from the journey. And there is like a sequence of questions we're trying out, where I'm still kind of improving it as we go forward. But it's basically about the first set of questions is about the journey and how you got to where you are, and what you've been learning through it. And I guess the first question is really about the doorway. How did you get into doing this work, this social arts theater work? What brought you to do it?
Yeah, I mean, like many people probably who do theater of the oppressed, and I don't just do theater of the oppressed, but that was the entry point, really. I think like quite a few of us, I started in theater. I was a theater director, a theater major in college, and lived and did the struggling artist thing in New York City for some years, and I was a director, right? So I directed Shakespeare and Brecht, and the plays I chose to direct were always very meaty plays. I never directed fluff, as we might say, but it was I was a theater person. And then I left the theater, which is actually an important part of my story, and it's actually a huge part of what informs everything that I do to this day. Um, I I knew that I wanted to be a parent. It was like, what do I want to be when I grow up? And a daddy was always what I wanted to be. I mean, it's a funny thing. And I don't know that many men who really had such a drive from an early age. And I know this because when my first child was born, many of my old friends said, "Wow, you've wanted this since I've known you," right? And I had children a little bit later than I expected to in life, but so I had this, I didn't have children yet, but I knew that I wanted to do that, and I wanted to do it well. I wanted to do it being very present for my kids, which I know in the West, certainly a lot of fathers, that's not what my father's generation did well, being present for their kids. And I swore that I would be an active, present father. And so I'm having this theater career, and I'm completely consumed and lost in the art. When I direct a play, it's like I take another lover. It's that consuming. The play becomes the other lover. And I did not think that I could do both well, honestly. That was really an important factor for me in my whole story. Um, I I I believed that I could make it as a professional theater artist. I figured my track was as an artistic director of a regional theater, and I'm pretty sure that I could have made a living doing that. But at what cost to my personal life, particularly the not-for-profit theater world in the United States, is very hard to have a sane life doing. So I left theater and I became a massage therapist, to make a long story short. And then before the end of the year in massage school, I happened to be, as I tell this story, I joke that I was in the wrong pub at the wrong time, or the right pub at the right time. I don't know, but I was seeing a massage classmate's performance art piece in a bar. And I happened to sit at a table of the founder of the Seattle Public Theater. And I knew this just because we were chatting. We had mutual people in the performance, and they were at the time. This is 1990. They were a theater for dialogue, um, and I was very intrigued. It wasn't an agitprop theater. I mean, for those that know Boal's story, he shifted from agitprop theater to theater for dialogue, right? But they were doing theater for dialogue, and she was telling me about it, and I didn't even register at the moment, but she mentioned Boal. She had been in Boal's first class at NYU in 1989 or something, so she had been exposed to TO, and they were dabbling a little bit with TO, not very successfully. I mean, it was unknown in the US at the time outside of academic circles. And I think Theater of the Oppressed Lab in New York was starting about the same time. And anyway, I got very excited. So for me, it was this combination. I know many of us, this is similar. It's a combination of all these parts of ourselves: the artist, the theater artist, the activist, I mean, all these things coalesced in this world. And so I got real excited, and she said, "Well, you should join our board of directors." And I said, "No way. I worked very hard to leave the theater so I could have a sane life." I became a massage therapist. I was very happy, right? She said, "Well, perhaps this would be an opportunity for you to have a different relationship with the theater." And I went, "There's no way I'm going to join your board." So I joined their board, and the rest, as they say, is history. But and she invited me to take over the Theater of Liberation program, which is what they called Theater of the Oppressed, and because they couldn't get anything off the ground, so I took the ball and ran with it. And interestingly, just one other aside, because that's the end of that, what was the doorway? Um, a lot happened, of course, in the process of developing a program based on Boal, but also there was a playback theater company down the hall, and playback was fairly new in the U.S. at the time as well. And there was a playback theater company in another room down the hall, and I got to know them, and I fell in love with playback theater almost simultaneously or within the year, and we started to do playback as well. So for a long time, even though I call Theater of the Oppressed my main tool, we use playback theater a ton to this day. I've been a playback practitioner nearly 30 years now, and other forms of embodied learning, but yeah, so that was the doorway.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I actually, I think I told you I wrote an article when I was still in university about playback and theater of the oppressed, a comparison, and I was quoting some article that you were writing with Hannah Fox as well. It's in Hebrew. I still didn't finish the translation, but it's yeah. Also for me, actually, it's interesting. Playback came almost a little bit before Theater of the Oppressed, or simultaneously, and I find what you've been kind of exploring for a long time, and now also articulating through the latest writings, and to be really really interesting. And just
I mean,
kind of
it's interesting how much it's the two are such a part of me. It's like I need both. I sometimes say we do what we need, right? And I need both, because for me, Theater of the Oppressed is very yang, has such an action orientation, which is a part of me. But playback is more yin. It's more reflective, and that's not only a part of me. I might actually call it my superpower. Like, my real strength is my yin, and for a man, that's not where the rewards come. I think for our whole dominant Western culture, a patriarchal culture, it's not where the rewards come. So, but play, at least in the applied theater world, gives me a lot of permission to bring that part of myself out. And even when I facilitate an event that uses both forms, I have to shapeshift. It's a very different body. It's a very different energy when I'm leading playback than when I'm leading Theater of the Oppressed. Like, I can feel it chemically changing in my body, how I am and how I must be in order to serve those forms. And I love it. And it used to be like multiple personality. It was very unnerving in the early years. I could feel that shift. Now it's integrated much more, that it's not a jolting shift, but I even say you can lead Theater of the Oppressed very in, and you can lead playback theater very, you can bring different aspects to the work. But yeah, so TO and playback are still a huge part. And in fact, the fourth session of a 4-part series that Hannah Fox and I are leading happens this Thursday. So we're not only doing it, but there's more and more people that are attracted to both forms. It's almost like we could do that full time. There's enough people that recognize the power of both ways of working. So yeah. Sorry if I.
Yeah. I find it fascinating, and I read the article, and I recommend to people to look it up on the website. And I love this yin and yang metaphor, and I find it resonating with my own research now. So in the last years I've been doing social presence in theater, and I also feel, I told Arawana, which is the founder of this. She's a Japanese American dancer, choreographer, and meditation teacher. And I once told her that I feel that she's reinventing theater of the oppressed from the feminine principle. Uh, and it really feels this kind of receptive and the yin and the yang, and then also the complementary aspect of what you're speaking about now, like how can we integrate And then it kind of brings the whole conversation outside of theater into what it means to be a man in this new world, what it means to be, an integrated human being. What is our project now? Which, we can have a whole conversation just about that. But I want to bring that to the second question, which was, we're actually touching it, is what have been guiding you? What have been the principles that have been guiding you as you were developing your own work, and the project? What would say are the main essence of this work?
It's interesting. I certainly looked at your prep questions, but I don't tend to do prep. So, I mean, I didn't really think about my answers to any of these. It was just nice to see what you were going to ask. I'm better extempore. I'm better off the cuff anyway. The guiding principles. This is going to sound strange perhaps, but and I was talking to one of my mentees the other day about this in relationship to her practice and her some questions she was asking. But my main guiding principle is intuition. I listen deeply and operate from what feels like the right thing to do. And so one of my guiding principles is listening. I'm listening to my intuition. I'm listening to my heart. I'm listening to spirit. I'm also listening to other people. The bulk of my work is working with people. I tell people, give me a room full of people and I'm happy. In terms of the work, it's part of what makes COVID challenging. Although as I get older, I'm more and more of an introvert, so maybe it's not that big a deal. But I really pay attention to what people are sharing in their stories, or even asking for in their feedback, or saying. Right now, I'm going to jump to maybe several questions later, but not just as a man, but as a white man operating in the United States mostly. I've done plenty of international work and work with international folks, but the bulk of my work is in the US. So my expertise is, WTF is going on here. I wouldn't call it my expertise, but my, greatest experiences here. You were talking about, well, the work is changing from a feminist perspective. Well, in the United States, the work is changing and has to change from a racial perspective. There are a ton of Black and brown people, BIPOC, people of color here, who are needing the work to shift in how it's held, in part because of trauma, and racial dynamics, and reasons that are maybe not even for me to articulate, but the work is changing. And so my guiding principle is intuition and listening, both deep listening and listening deeply to others. And it's impacting not only how I approach the work. I'm going to have a couple of my mentees from last year help redesign the part 2 of the Theater of the Oppressed training that we do annually, and we had to alter this year because of COVID. We did it online, and the second half of it, or the part 2, will be in person hopefully next summer. And we need to redesign it because of racial trauma, among other things. It needs to be done differently. It needs to be held differently. And so it's impacting the actual practice, but it's also really impacting how I'm showing up in my own practice. And that's a whole. You have a question about challenges. I can get to that later. I think I'm probably addressing 3 or 4 of your questions in my answer right now. But
yeah. Well, you can just go
and
with
listening.
it. You can go with it, and we can we can change the rules, you know. So you know, but I guess you know and I feel you have been talking about the principles even before. You know, I find it again this yin and the yang and connecting to recognize, and then I've written down this you know, moving away from the consume starter artist images from which you started, and to leave it to be a father. And for me, you know, I feel to be a father is not just being a father, it's maybe something else as well. And the kind of father that you want to be and we want to show in the world. And how is that reflected in our artistic work? Um, but yeah, maybe we can bring that to the what have been the frustrations and the challenges that you have met and or still meeting right now as in this journey.
I mean, there's plenty of moments of challenge and frustration, but I would say I'll just the answer that feels most relevant in this moment, because this is the moment that we're in, for me relates to some of what I was just speaking a little bit about. So being a man and being a white man, I'm many other things, but those are important factors in what I'm going to say. You know, it's how do I show up in the work? We have a history of leadership, not only in the US, not only in the West, but in the world, men, and in the, you know, and in the West, white men, in the United States for sure. And that's problematic, you know. And so I know the work has to change. I know what leadership looks like needs to change. I know what leaders look like needs to change. The colonizer can no longer be in charge if we're going to have the healthy change that this world needs. And of course, it's been happening in bits and pieces throughout modern history, but you know, it's far from where it needs to be. And in the United States, we talk about the squad, this uh, somewhat small but formidable representation of women of color in the US Congress, right? And they get so much heat and attack from the dominant culture. I mean, it's horrific how much they have to field death threats, just being one piece of it. But I believe in the US and probably the world, that's the direction that leadership needs to move in order to create a healthier balance. It's not working, right? It's clearly not working. It never has, but I'm an optimist. I believe that things can be better. In fact, my optimism fuels my activism. I don't think I could be an activist if I didn't believe in human beings and what is possible, right? I would succumb to hopelessness. Um, but I think that's part of what needs to happen. So here I am now, 30 years in the field of applied theater, with a lot of experience and, you know, some honed skills, still honing, but I can't be the front person. It's like, it's important that I not. It's critical that I not be the front person. And so my biggest challenge right now is, how do I show up? How do I bring my gifts? Because they're of value. I believe in the value of elders, and I'm only now starting to get comfortable, or getting comfortable. I don't know that I'm comfortable yet, but even viewing myself in that light, what's the role of elders in the movement, right? So, you know, and I'm figuring that out and I'm navigating it. Certainly mentorship has been for quite a while a huge part, but it took my wife and co-conspirator Jaleh Almai to, you know, kind of push me to embrace that role 4 years ago when we started the mentorship program. Without her inspiration and, like, I mean, real push, um, I don't know that that would have happened. Certainly not then. I was very reluctant to embrace the elder role, but that's what I'm moving into more and more. And that feels like, you know, if I can find a way to do that gracefully and humbly, um, as I'm decentering myself, or I'm being decentered, the society is doing it as well for me. Um, I don't think I'm being asked to disappear, but I'm being asked to show up differently. And so I'm, you know, growing that muscle. That's the challenge and the blessing also.
Yeah. Um, Decentering and coming out and something new emerging, and yeah, maybe we can, like, the blessing, what have been the gifts or the blessings that you have found as well, doing this whole process of,
Well, like I said, we do what we need. Everything has been a blessing. I joke, but it's not really a joke, and it's that I've somehow pulled off a career where I have the incredible honor and privilege of learning from every human being that I've ever worked with. You know, I'm not just doing a gig, you know, it's every time I'm working with people, again, that deep listening is a running theme for me. I'm listening to their stories, I'm listening to their perspective, I'm listening to their heart and what makes them tick. And I learn about the world. So I've made a living learning from everybody that I've ever worked with. So you know, that's the blessing, and I can give many concrete examples of that. You know, but if I'm doing my job right, again, it's that's a guiding principle: the deep listening, listening to others, and listening through others, you know, through others' eyes and ears and life experience. I can never be them, but I can feel them. In much more detail as possible with that question, but that's.
yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. This my career, and then I wrote it my creare, which is like, it as my creation is learning from every human being. And so so I guess the next question is, it's kind of connected also with something that you already do, you know, the mentoring and the eldership. But and And the question is, what would be the advice you would give to someone starting on this path, or even to yourself starting on this path, you know, years ago?
Well, one is trust your intuition. I mean, I spoke to one of my mentees and you know, on a related question. You know, I mean, she wasn't asking how do I start on this path. I don't remember the question she was asking, but the main thing I was telling her is trust your intuition. I mean, intuition is a deep knowing, right? And we all have it. I do believe it is a natural gift that everyone has. Perhaps some have more access to it than others. Some have such access to it, it's their superpower. But you know, there's, again, speaking about dominant Western culture, has a very academic way of knowing things. And one might call it, it's a more of the patriarchy, it's the thinking knowing. Whereas there was a book written, I forget the author's name, but it was a very famous book. I think it was written in the early 70s, called Women's Way of Knowing. And I had to read that for a graduate school class. And, you know, the essence of it is intuition. That's more of the yin knowing, right? Rather than the yang knowing. the more feminine aspect of knowing. And when I say feminine and masculine, I'm not really talking gender. I'm talking aspects, more from an Eastern use of those words. So yeah, so the reward, I don't think just for men, for everyone in Western culture is, I know because I know the facts, or I know the information, or I've read, or I've studied, or or there's proof, and for me, again, intuition is a really, that's not to take away from the value of academic knowing or learning, but really listening. And so I think, following your heart, or following your gut. My mentor calls it belly walking, following your gut, right, is important. Oh yeah, my mentee's question was about what projects she should do, or she's kind of torn. There's this project or that project that she could do, and what was my counsel? And I said, what's your intuition? I mean, we had a long conversation about that. What does your heart say? Don't do what you think you should do. I mean, it's useful to think. Humans do have that, extra, I won't call it gift necessarily, because I sometimes think that could be as much of a problem as it hurts. There's a joke, how do you get rid of 20 pounds of useless fat? Cut off your head. I think thinking can get us into trouble. It certainly is not my superpower. I think very well, but I don't always make the best decisions that way, right? But my intuition has never steered me wrong, ever. Except, when I was younger in relationship, but I wouldn't call that intuition. I would call that impulse. And the wisdom to know the difference, right? Intuition and impulse. Intuition is deep knowing, and impulse is perhaps informed by wound. But anyways, I digress. I don't know if I answered your question really. What advice would I give to people beginning in the field? But intuition, and depending who they are, like a white man entering the field, I would say humility. You got a bigger task right now. You want to do the work and be in the field, beautiful. It's not that you shouldn't do it, but how you walk with it and the humility that you carry, best get that game on. That's not tangible. That's, other than that, the obvious, just do it. Just get a room full of people and start practicing. Call 10 of your best friends, order a pizza, and say, I want to try some stuff out. Don't wait till you think you have it perfect, because you will never have it perfect, ever. Mistakes will come all along the way. So, don't wait until you've taken enough trainings to practice, but use low stakes characters at first. Play with some of your own people first before you wield these powerful tools upon the masses. How's that for?
Well, it's pretty
three
good. And
tips?
Well, first of all, I think you can see that you have been doing that for a while, in the sense that supporting people starting their way into it. And yeah, I love it, this thing about trusting the intuition, which is kind of, I guess the risk of becoming a mentor is becoming a teacher, or becoming someone that knows, as opposed to someone, teaching something that to someone that doesn't know. But actually, the mentoring is about, allowing the knowing, the deep knowing to emerge, and the way that this can happen is sort of like bringing, responding to a question with a question, and then bringing the inner resources, like the intuition, which I love. And I also love this kind of bringing it back to this kind of how reason has been part of how the system has been, patriarchy has been kind of uh, dominating, the mind over the body, as opposed to listening to the body. And there is a lot of the work with the, as well, that I've been doing with the SBT and the social field, which is about kind of how can we give back the validity to that way of knowing, which is natural, which is, the way that we have and always are knowing, I don't know. So actually, we're going pretty fast. That's good. We're in the second part of the interview, which is more about now, like what's happening right now. And the first question is, what are you busy with? And you started to say some things, but what are the things that keeps you busy right now? What do you feel is your main work right now? Current moment.
I have 4 children, 4 sons, at least that's their current gender identities. 21-year-old, about to turn 19 on Friday year old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So what keeps me busy right now? There you go. Especially the 3-year-old. And that's my main charge. Somehow I've pulled off a career. I have, I think, been relatively successful in my dream vision of being an active present parent. I will not be on my deathbed going, Augusto, when I brought him to Seattle, this is a relevant story. I brought him to Seattle back in 1995, I think, when I was running the program at Seattle Public Theater. And I think other than Theater of the Oppressed Lab, we were like the only grassroots, non-university affiliated organizing body to bring Boal. So it almost killed us. It was a lot. I have many stories, many funny stories about that. But this story I'm sharing now is I had the pleasure of driving him wherever we needed to go, and I had him for nearly 2 weeks. And I got to ask some personal questions because these were important questions to me. And I asked him, "Do you have any regrets in your life?" And he paused. And I have a body memory of this. I was driving, and he's to my right. I can picture this moment, and he just paused and said, I wish I had spent more time with my sons. He has two boys, right? Julian and Fabienne. Of course, this is a poignant, moment for me, because this had always been a driving factor for me. And the fact that I always broke the rules of running a business, or I've been very protective of my time. So what keeps me busy has always been, first and foremost, my family. Yet I still have to make a living, and I love the work. As you said earlier in our conversation, this isn't just work, this is life work. It becomes a part of us. It is. But it doesn't take over my life in the way that directing a play does. I don't work as much as I could. I could be traveling. I've had conversations with Hector about this, and he was out. He was traveling. There was a period he was traveling. 80% of his life was travel, and I remember him going, "There are costs, brother. There are costs." Because it's a very glamorous and meaningful life, beautiful work with people all over the world. I've done a fair bit of that, but I don't want to do that. I want to be home with my family. So I keep going back to that. And I have been successful at that. I might be bigger, but I don't care. I don't want to be on my deathbed going, I wish I had spent more time with my sons. I'm not going to do that. And then in terms of the work, I mentioned to you in an informal part of our conversation, I'm very intentionally scaling back, decentering me as the front person. My wife, Jaleh, the co-director of the Mandala Center, is now stepping more into leadership role and doing more work, and I'm trying to do less work in the field, right? Working with groups, working with communities, trainings, whatever. We work in a lot of different ways. We do some grassroots work and some training work and mentoring. So those are very quickly some answers. Those are some things that we're doing. And I'm supporting Jaleh more, and I'm with the kids more, which thrills me no end. I'm very well suited to be a stay-at-home dad, honestly. I would have been fine doing that. It gives me a lot of pleasure. Chop wood, carry water doesn't bore me, it thrills me. We call just the mundane aspects of living. I'm very happy washing dishes. I mean, I actually am. And then developing programs to support and lift leadership that does not look like me is a big part of where my attention has been going and is very vividly going. Is just creating space for supporting, lifting up marginalized voices, through the mentorship program. Most of the mentees we've had the last 2 years in particular are women of color, which, that's people of color is a US centered political term, but that has not been entirely strategic. It's just what's been happening. It's who's been showing up. It's who's been asking me for mentorship. And it feels completely right. Again, the intuitive thing, this is what needs to be happening. And if they're okay choosing me, and I ask them, why are you choosing me? And mostly I get, don't ask the question. If we're choosing you, just know that there are reasons. It's our business. I think mentees and mentors choose each other. Like I said, it's a relationship. I'm not a teacher. It's a relationship, right? And so my support of them is very much fitted to who they are, and I'm deeply listening to them as I get to know them, and how can I be the best support to their dream, And even though it's a theater of the oppressed centered mentorship, I am not attached to theater of the oppressed. And long ago, I gave myself permission to deviate from what I would call classical theater of the oppressed. I still do some classical theater of the oppressed. A few years ago, we did a legislative theater project with transgender youth, and that was textbook Boal every step of the way. I mean, it was, from all I know of the roots of TO, that's it. So I sometimes work quite classically, but I often don't. I've gotten a lot of flack for it. I think I'm about to get quite a lot of flack for it. In fact, I got a heads up from the editor of the PTO, Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed journal, that there's a big article coming out completely challenging and even rejecting the theater of the oppressor work that I developed, adapting TO to work with privilege. I have a lot to say about that. I mean, that's been a big part. That's been a big contribution I've made to the field. Like I said earlier in my answer to your question, I'm not attached to TO. I'm attached to social justice. I'm attached to a just and joyous life for all people. I'm attached, which includes my life. It includes having a healthy family. If I'm work 90 hours a week, which is easy to do, there's activist burnout, right? Then my family suffers, and they need therapy. I mean, I'm trying to set them up well so they don't need to, I'm trying to give them a life that I think as an activist we're trying to make possible for everybody. The people that I work with, they just want a life where they can, I mean, don't want to make an assumption, but I think most people just want a life where they can eat enough and have a reasonably comfortable home and feel safe and raise their children and do their spirit work. What am I doing if I'm not attending to that in my own family, right? So so it's this balance. I think I'm digressing. I've lost my track from your original question, so maybe I'll take a pause there. Yeah, there's many things embedded in what I just shared. Yeah,
I think you're then obviously I like this being busy with is you started with the family, and then but you're also bringing um, somehow the values that you hold, which are connected to kind of this making kind of balance and sane choices for yourself, and bringing other people to see that. And I wonder, and actually it's interesting you started to bring that. Um, so yeah, so the next question is really about like what can, and again we're using this term as well of social arts, which is kind of more general, but what kind of support social arts can give. Now my daughter came in from school, so you hear her. uh, but so
yeah.
what?
My 3-year-old enter naked at any moment. So yeah,
Yeah.
it could. And that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing to me. Sorry, I want to say one other thing. I studied, one of my many teachers is Malidoma Somé, a Dagara elder from Burkina Faso. Hector, I know, also studied with Malidoma. We shared that when we first met. We realized we had both, was one of our teachers, and who, was his charge was to bring indigenous wisdom, African Dagara wisdom to the West. But I did a workshop with him where it was a family workshop where people could bring their kids, and he said, because it was new, and in the West it's like kids are interfering, and it's like sacrilege to have the distraction of children at a workshop. What do I do? I mean, very few people in the West that go to workshops can deal with that, right? Which, yeah. And Malidoma said, if we're not including the children, what are we doing? What are we actually doing in terms of social healing or social change? If it doesn't include the children, our work is incomplete. So yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, no problem about your daughter's sounds, and
Well,
Jojo can walk in any.
I feel she's like my main teacher about this work. Like I'm learning so much from her about what I feel is the essence of this work, and I also completely kind of resonate with this. Yeah, like she appears like I guess this is something we have in common. I also collaborate. My partner is also doing this work, and we're collaborating on many projects. Although we didn't really establish a center, but we are working in ImaginAction and Collective Diabolo, and it has its own kind of interesting challenges. But I from time to time I I feel like in Italian you would say il capolavoro. Capolavoro is like your best work. Your so I say like still our best work is Noah. It's the best work. And I feel it would always be our best work. No matter how great of stuff we will create. And she appears like in a lot of our videos and our video artwork. She kind of appears in them. And I have a sense, I have a vision of the future I don't know if this will happen, but let's see. And that I'm facilitating with Noah, that we're traveling in the world, and we're facilitating together. And I just can't wait to do that. It's really exciting for me.
Uri, I brought my son Shay, who's now 21. I think he might have been 11. I brought him. I did a 5-week residency in India with Radha, because I was her meant. She would call me her teacher. But and I brought Shay at 11, and he accompanied me to all the work that we were doing. Just about. There were a few times he was in school. He did some school there. And I brought my son Orion to South Africa again. I think he was 9 or 10 when I did that, working. And so, yeah, it becomes a part of them. All of my children have absorbed so much of my work, because they're not always there, and there's some contexts that wouldn't work well, but it's a beautiful thing. And what are they learning? How incredible. What a gift you're offering your children. Maybe they won't do some of the crazy shit that people do, because they'll have an understanding and an empathy just by being around human beings doing deep work and social change work and justice consciousness. Maybe, just maybe, they will be part of a better world because of it.
Great.
Hopefully.
So now we're in this question, actually. What can social arts do support humanity in this moment of transition?
So that was one answer to your question, talking about the children. I mean, really, if people start early with that consciousness, we stand a better chance. If kids are getting, there's a question in the US, I don't know how it is in other parts of the world so much, but parents ask, how do you talk to your children about racism? Right? And I'm giving a roundabout answer to your question, but and my simple answer is, well, how do you talk to your children about sex? Right? If you're uncomfortable talking about it, you're not going to be able to do it very well. If you get comfortable talking about these issues and you normalize it, just make it normal. Talking about racism becomes a normal topic. It's just normalized, right? So talking about sex, if it's just a normal topic, it's not a taboo. It's not a weird thing to talk about it. I think, yeah. And so again, back to how does social arts help? Well, you can talk about all these things, but it's engaging, it's alive. So my 7-year-old might not want to sit and listen to a lecture about the patriarchy or about racism, but theater around it, how engaging. And he's riveted by this stuff. He's riveted. So he's already been exposed to tons of gigantic issues, but it's aesthetic, it's ritualized, it's playful, it's real. It feels really real. So, how can social arts? It, just from an activist, from a strategic activist point of view, you want to get in the media. Theater's attractive. It's engaging. It's appealing. You will attract attention through the arts. It's, and I mean, Boal talks about this too. He says, theater of the oppressed, one of the goals of theater of the oppressed is to rehumanize humanity. It's humanizing. I mean, the arts have been so cut in US public schools, because with budget cuts, the public school system in the US, I'm not going to get into it. It's hurting, to say the least. But as money wanes, one of the first things to go is the arts. Well, because they're not seeing it as the academic knowing. This is patriarchal, academic knowing and learning. Well, incredible things can be learned through the arts, not just theater, right? Playback or theater of the oppressed, but it also rehumanizes the students, who then may have more capacity to absorb the algebra in their math class. I mean, there's science around this. It's the capacity for input. If you're stressed and anxious and feeling isolated and disengaged, how do you learn well? Well, the arts reminds us who we are at a very deep level. Music. I mean, I don't have to go into a whole long thing about this. I think many people, probably anybody listening to this, probably already believes this. And it's, no, don't cut the arts. They'll actually do better in math class. And it's, you want to learn about civic engagement. You want your civics class in school, or contemporary world issues. These are required. CWP is a required class in high school. You want to learn about contemporary world problems? Do it through some of the Theater of the Oppressed work. You'll learn it more deeply and you'll remember it when you're 60. Whereas most of that stuff goes in one ear and out the other. All this embodied learning, you never forget it. It's in your bones. It's in your cell structure. So, I mean, I don't need to do a whole sales pitch on it, but why is it important? Here's that was a handful of reasons right there. It's engaging. The media loves it. It's fun. It's a way to work on really difficult issues and have a good time doing it, even if it brings up strong feelings and even pain and trauma. Of course, trauma informed is a whole other topic. That's where Theater of the Oppressed fails in a lot of cases. Not very trauma informed. Right? It's a huge issue in the United States at this moment, especially around race. The work has to change. It can't be done the way it was done before. It stimulates the crap out of people. And it used to be cost benefit analysis. Felt like the benefits outweighed the cost. I'm not so sure now, about that. And certainly around race in the US in a mixed group. I just went on a big tangent, so I'll stop there. But yeah, the power of the work is profound, and it can actually create change. I've done legislative theater that did concrete change. Things changed. Barbara Santos said, Theater of the Oppressed doesn't change the world. It helps people rehearse to change the world. I may be paraphrasing her slightly, but she explicitly said recently, she was a guest in our mentorship program the last 2 years running. She has said a couple of things that contradict, things that a lot of Theater of the Oppressed people think. One is that Theater of the Oppressed doesn't create change. It's a rehearsal for change. Maybe that nuance is obvious. The other is, the classical theater of the oppressed, where you take the place of the oppressed, the protagonist, the one protagonist. This is where we're going to get challenged on Theater of the Oppressor, because we're opening up interventions in forum for any character. I know David Diamond does it through a different lens, but I understand why that's a valuable way to work. But Barbara said explicitly, and this is not a paraphrase, I am sick and tired of white men playing me. She's a Black woman, Boal's main joker back in the day. Yeah, so for her, and definitely for me, there's other characters. Basically, play yourself. What's your struggle? Don't try to figure out somebody else's struggle. Figure out your own struggle, which to me is not that far from the roots of why Boal created Theater of the Oppressed. He was working with, peasant populations in Latin America during dictatorship and other things. And he'd work with marginalized groups, and they'd explore solutions to their own problems. But when I'm working in heterogeneous mixed groups, it's ridiculous for a white person, a white man to play a black woman and expect that to land well here. Anyway, that was a big tangent. Yeah, I started to go on a whole other topic. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, it's fine.
You can edit that out or whatever. Yeah.
It's fine. Like in the end of it, it's like where the questions in themselves are the possibility to exchange. And so again, like looking from now and looking to the future, actually from now into the future, and you can answer for theater of the press or for social arts or for the world, but what's your wildest dream for the future?
Oh, the wildest dream is I work myself out of a job. It's my dream for my children. I mean, it's the fantasy wildest dream that we don't need social change work because things are good and everybody's living a good life. But I don't know, people might, my optimism in human beings might get challenged if that ever happened. People would find a way to muck it up. But that's my wildest dream, is that the work I do is not necessary, that we don't need to do racial justice work because we have a racially just world. We don't need to do gender justice work because the gender binary is no longer the dominant culture, and sexism and the patriarchy are no longer in operation. And, I mean, those are pie in the sky dreams, but you asked for wildest. That's my dream, that I can just hang out with my kids, tend the garden, and maybe cook for a living. I don't know, I mean, that's my wildest dream. I don't really, or, just do a piece of theater now and again, just to keep people in tuned, so I'm using my, or maybe that the applied theater work or the social arts work is used to maintain a healthy culture rather than fix a broken one. To maintain, because we do need maintenance, just like a marriage or a love relationship needs maintenance. It's just not going to stay healthy by itself. It needs maintenance. You need to give it attention. I think human beings will, but things are so broken right now. That's my wildest dream, that we're doing our work for maintenance, not to fix something that's broken.
Yeah.
Took a while to kind of get the nugget on it.
Yeah. It's great. Anyway, yeah, it makes me think about a lot of images, and I love this. Get myself to the situation in which I'm not needed, and I feel it's really in the core of being a facilitator. It's about getting to a situation in which you are not needed, in which things are, even in a micro scale, right? Like your intervention is basically to remove yourself as soon as possible from a situation in which things can kind of flow in how they, in the best possible way. And then of course, but then there is a maintenance, and I love this kind of idea that, and I sort of think that theater is a sort of, has been since the beginning, a sort of maintenance system for our human system. It's a in that sense an important.
I mean, or even in our contract work, or when I'm working with an organization, we're always either working with some or organizations or setting up to work with some. I feel so excited. We're working in our local public school system. Members of our team, I'm part of the team, are going in and working with the entire faculty and staff, from superintendent down to support staff, all of the principals too, doing anti-racism work, racial equity work. And we're weaving in some theater of the oppressed. That's part of our model, and sometimes it's more theater than others. This crowd needs it to ease in much slower. But we tell all these organizations, so our goal, we want a long-term commitment, but specifically so we can help your organization get to a point that you don't need us. You don't always want to bring in an outside artist, right? How can you get a community or an organization to be self-sustaining? Is there a team of people within the institution that can keep the dialogue going and do the maintenance that the school district needs? So it's, again, I tell folks, my goal is to work ourselves out of a job, even on an institutional, organizational contract level. Don't need us, then I'm happy.
Yeah, great. So we're in the final part of the interview, and I'm trying to kind of pack the last 3 questions in one. Also kind of trying to, and in some interviews I only got halfway, like with David, I only got to the first 5 questions. Now, so we'll have to reschedule, which is fine. We can actually continue the conversation. So the third part is about building a network, and it's part of kind of the vision that I'm trying to hold for ImaginAction, is facilitating this idea of a network of social arts practitioners, and they're exchanging the mentoring each other, organizations mentoring each other, practitioners mentoring each other. And there are 3 questions here. But one is, how do you see the importance of this kind of mentoring and building a network? And then what would you like to receive and give in such a network?
I have a lot to say about this topic. I don't know that I can do that right now. We might, if you want me to respond to those pieces, we may need to do that at a later date, because Jale has a call actually with Hannah Fox in the next couple of minutes. So I'm going to need to be on with kids, and I'm doing homeschooling today. So is it okay if we table this section, because it's an important section and important questions that you're asking, and I have some definite thoughts about that.
Yeah, let's do that, and maybe we can bring more people in. Maybe we can do, because I have the same question with David still to do. So I'm thinking maybe we can do like a table conversation.
Sure. Yeah. No, and I think David and I may have some similar perspectives on it. I mean, for me, if I had one sound bite, it's like, stop the divisiveness. I say this to our country. I say it to the theater of the oppressed community. Social artists, the attacks that activists tear each other down. It's just, you got to be fucking kidding me. I have such strong feelings about it. Even this article that's about to come out, tearing down the theater of the oppressor work, y'all. It's just like, why waste your life force? Why waste your life force? We're working for social justice. But anyway, that's a soundbite, and I know David has strong feelings about that as well.
Yeah. So let's reschedule.
And I know that you do, because you've been a lot about unifying rather than division. But it is astounding to me how much antagonism people have with each other. My jaw has dropped. It's what distanced me from the PTO conferences. It's just like, whatever. Come on, y'all. I just feel like saying, relax. That's why I did our combining playback and theater of the oppressed performance, to bring those 2 communities of practitioners together. And it worked. And playback and there's way more people into both now. It's just like, oh my God, but people are so into my way and not your way, the fundamentalism, the right way to do things. I just feel like smacking them. Just relax. Sorry. I have feelings.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. I think definitely let's continue this conversation. And actually, in a couple of days, I'm organizing this offers and needs market. Let's see how many people show up. But I see the frustration, but I also feel like there is this divisiveness, and there is also, people are still, even when I say I don't agree with you, I'm engaging you, you know? So there is also something, even there is some kind of a recognition, and sometimes it's shaky, but like, how can we hold that and kind of bring that back to this question of
Yeah.
being.
I want to add one. I want to add one thought about that. I'm engaging you, right? There are many ways to engage, and I would love to see more of that engagement take the form of curiosity. Tell me more. I'm trying to understand what you're doing. Don't write a frickin' article tearing down an approach to social change work. Call me, ask me about it. Ask me so you understand what I'm really doing, right? But people are very quick to engage, critical in engagement. I think that's patriarchal bullshit. Really, it's just like, there are ways to engage in love and respect, and challenge. Challenge is important, but without curiosity, that those challenges feel unappealing. I'm not as interested in those challenges. Challenges with love and curiosity, they're awesome. I take that. I take that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm taking this as our final word for this one: love and curiosity. As yeah.
Critical thinking isn't about being critical. Critical thinking is sometimes about asking questions. Talking to the TO people now. You want to do critical thinking? Ask some questions. TO people know about asking questions, but they're quick to critique and not ask. Not they, but some, you know.
Mm. Good. Thank you so much, Mark, for this time. And let's reschedule. Maybe we can have a whole group meeting with David and other
Yeah.
people, and continue this conversation, because I feel the conversation is what's important, that is going on, and maybe slowly more people, and we have, we manage to bring all those voices in and bring us to the same table.
Yeah. Beautiful, Uri. Thanks. Nice to connect with you. I mean, I do feel you out there, out in the world. I know your heart is huge, and I've seen you put massive efforts into connecting and bringing love and curiosity. I mean, I see that's how you roll, as we say in the US. It's how you roll.
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah,
All you can do.
so it's what we can do. All we can do.
All right. Well, off to parenting I am.
Yeah. Have a great day, and say hello to your family.
Same to you. I got to meet Ilaria during the Joker Gardens for the first time, and I really liked her a lot. She seems great.
Yeah. I'm lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. We are. Yeah. I think we both found very powerful women to keep us in our place.
Keep us on our path of transformation. That's what I feel like. Yeah, but that's a whole other conversation. We'll keep that also. For...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Ciao. Bye, Mark.